Report from NKVD Officer Anzelika Mozarov, rank Captain of State Security, Division, Anomalous Materials and Activity Research, date October 24th, 1946. Project Vasilisa Conclusion Report. Overview. This report is regarding the final findings of Project Vasilisa. All materials are accounted for. All documents relating to Hex and Brew have been classified and sealed. The facility has been partially dismantled and buried. All participants have been institutionalized under slow progression schizophrenia. All researchers exposed have been quarantined. We're still conducting a research for the initial Hex and Brew Lebensborn children. Initial encounter. After Soviet troops seized Berlin, documents relating to an offshoot of Lebensborn were uncovered. Project Hex and Brew. Very little can be deciphered. All documents were encoded using a special Enigma machine created specifically for the project. Most SS officers and researchers relating to the project died in the siege. The few that were interrogated revealed sparse details. What we know for certain is that several groups of potential males and females were exposed to a synthetic compound, HCD-79. This chemical composition has yet to be determined. The formula was developed focusing on adapting folklore remedies and various eponymous witches' brews. These recipes primarily include toxic flora, for example, something akin to old night show poultices. Males and females were broken into three distinct groups. Female ingestion before and during pregnancy, male ingestion before insemination, and both male and female ingestion before and during pregnancy. We are unsure of the results, but most led to birth defects according to our interrogations. There is no correlation between which groups ingested it and which had birth defects. The most important information was an unintended side effect on cognitive performance. All subjects showed noticeable improvement in cognition and no longer required a regular sleep pattern. After reviewing this section of information, NKVD Anomalous Materials and Activities Research Division decided to move forward with testing HCD-79 on returning prison volunteer soldiers to see its effectiveness as a combat stimulant. Testing facility. A former bunker at a classified location was converted into a makeshift hospital. The subjects would co-inhabit a common space and sleep in separate rooms according to sex. Researchers from the Abnormal Psychology Department, along with the Biochemical Research Department, would conduct the test. All reserves of HCD-79 were transferred there. It was believed that the formula could be deciphered if the test results yielded a net positive effect on the test subjects. If not, no attempt would be made to reverse engineer it. As of this report, all attempts to reverse engineer HCD-79 have been cancelled. Test logs condensed. All logs have been attached to this report in full. For the sake of brevity, I will recount and give a brief outline of the day's events from the start of the experiment to finish. Day 1. The volunteers are led into the quarters, 8 males and 8 females. The males will be referred to as M1 through M8. The females will be referred to as F1 through F8. All subjects are in their 20s. All combat veterans, all found guilty of various crimes prior to volunteering to fight. While clemency and pardons were told verbally to all participants, they were to be transferred to an asylum regardless of test results as to protect Project Vasilisa. All subjects received a 3 mm dosage orally once a day. The initial dosage received complaints of taste, numbness of the tongue, and headache. Alertness did not seem affected initially. Subjects' appetites seemed to have been suppressed as their lunch and dinner meals remained only partially eaten. Cognition tests revealed very little outside of their initial baseline statistics. However, participants showed more interest in performing than they did during the baseline readings. Day 2. All subjects report minor headaches. Appetite is still suppressed with only half meals being consumed. Tests began again with little improvement. All subjects reported getting very little sleep, between 3 to 4 hours. However, all reported not feeling tired or restless. New symptoms include photosensitivity. Subjects have a distaste for lighting and are complaining about the air quality of the bunker. The bunker is receiving fresh air feed that is actually filtered to reduce environmental variables in the experiment. Day 3. All subjects report very little sleep. Roughly 2 to 3 hours tops. Subjects are complaining about the brightness of the lights. A new pattern has emerged to explain the lack of appetite. When two subjects eat near each other, they appear to share a sense of fullness. Subjects M4 and M6 are particularly close and spend most of their free time talking. When M4 and M6 eat together, they only eat roughly the equivalent of one normal meal for an individual. The same is true of F2 and F3. Cognition testing has revealed a new trend. Group think tanks seem to have arose. Together, by proximity, the subjects will help each other with testing. When instructed to cease and have it be individual testing, the subjects would protest. They were often confused as to who was being addressed during the test if they were within 1 meter of each other. A new test was developed to see the limits and benefits of groupthink synchronization. Day 4. Groupthink Test 1 involves showing playing cards to subjects and seated directly across from the interviewer. A second subject is positioned behind the interviewee, facing away from the interviewer, the opposite direction of their counterpart. Test 1. M4 is facing the interviewer. M6 is facing the wall, with his back to M4's back. M6 confirms he cannot see the interviewer. He hesitates before doing so. M4 is shown the Queen of Hearts. M6 answers the Queen of Hearts. This continues. The results have a 70% margin of success. Subjects' photosensitivity has increased. They are actively attempting to create lampshades to dim down the lighting fixtures. They did not stop when instructed to. Appetite has returned to normal, but all subjects seem to show symptoms of iron deficiency. Their iron intake was increased. Subjects are agitated and getting into arguments with one another, most often causes accusing each other of stealing stories or memories. When recounting the memory of a story to each other, one subject will protest and say that they were the originator of that story. An example: F2 is discussing growing up in St. Petersburg and visiting Finland in her youth. F3 immediately interjects, saying that she had been the one to do so. The two begin to argue incoherently about who was from where and what had transpired in their youth. Often the argument would switch voices between the two, taking each other's talking points and reversing accusations. These arguments were transcribed but are too incoherent and disjointed to be fully understood. Day 5. The lighting fixtures have begun to fluctuate. An unknown electrical anomaly appears to be occurring in the bunker's interior. The subjects are relieved when this occurs, as it gives them brief respite from the lighting. They do not sleep at all, nor appear to be aware of their sleep deprivation. They no longer seem to distinguish themselves by name or designation. When groupthink tests began, they could not coordinate themselves properly. They were escorted to their seats by the researchers physically. This created a jarring sensation and affected any subject within 2 meter radius. When one was moved, all within that radius would react to the movement. Test 12. F1 and M5 are led into position. F1 is facing the interviewer, M5 away. The interviewer holds up a card. 2 of aces, replies F6, who is sitting within 2 meter radius. F6 is instructed to leave the radius. Instead, F1 and M5 attempt to leave. F6 must be removed physically. The researchers are beginning to refer to the tests as herding cats. The disorganized and blurred egos and identities of the test subjects make it impossible to coordinate them at this point. The researchers discuss whether or not to cease testing, but decide to proceed to see how long-term exposure affects the subjects. It is important to note at this point, according to all audio logs, it has never been revealed to the subjects that they were to be institutionalized post-experiment, or that it could potentially last months to years, depending upon how long the researchers defined as long-term. At this point, it is impossible for them to discern this information. M3 is observed near a lighting fixture. He attempts to dim it with his mind. It does, in fact, dim a minuscule but measurable amount. When doing so, he recoils in pain, but him alone. This is the only time they act individually at this point in the experiment. The researchers bring F7 and M8 to another fixture and coax them to work together. After one attempt, they appear to have an atonic seizure and must stop. They do not speak for the remainder of the day. A researcher attempts to perform a physical sensation experiment. They take F3 and M4 to a table. They ask M4 to describe the sensation in his hand. The researcher proceeds to prod the individual fingers of F3's hand. M4 answers correctly as to what finger on what hand is being manipulated. However, at one point the researcher attempts to trigger an involuntary muscle response by prodding the knee of F3. M4 stumbles and becomes violent once this occurs, attempting to hit the researcher. However, their impaired coordination and blurred senses make it difficult for M4 to properly gauge distance and location, and ended up hitting F3 by mistake, resulting in the two of them feuding. At this point, it is important to note that the researchers who have not had any direct exposure to HCD-79 are complaining of headaches and nausea when in too close proximity to the subjects. Day 6. All the subjects are angered and paranoid. They accuse the researchers of holding them prisoner. The researchers deny this, but the subjects are demanding to be released. They accuse the researchers of thinking it and planning to keep us here forever. The guards are brought in to subdue the subjects. However, the subjects appear to have developed a precognition of this event. They rally and form a human shield using the researchers. They use the researchers' keys to escape into an adjacent corridor, but at this point the guards have reached them. Subjects M4 and M5 hold the researchers hostage with makeshift weapons. Subjects F1 and F3 have circled around the hall to flank the guards with their own makeshift weapons. The rest begin to escape down a special corridor the researchers use. They are familiar with it despite never having seen it before. The surviving guards testify that they found their movements predicted and had trouble seeing and thinking properly during the melee. Eventually, the guards overpowered them by sheer force of number. They were subdued temporarily, but all remaining guards suffered a sort of atonic seizure that allowed F1, F3, and M5 to escape. M4 is killed during the melee. The facility is placed on lockdown. The remaining guards are withdrawn, and the ventilation is now being flooded with airborne sedative. The dosage is increased over the next 3 days. Day 9. The surviving subjects are found unconscious. They are further sedated by an intravenous injection. They have now been moved to separate asylums, and they are under close guard and in total isolation. No one is allowed within 3 meters of them for longer than 1 minute. All researchers have been quarantined until further notice. The remaining reserves of HCD-79 have been moved to a more secure facility. End of report.